before we blast off, say hi in the comments. It may seem small, but it helps the algorithm beam this out to more sci-fi fans. And I seriously love seeing who's part of the crew.
High Administrator Vorax stood at the observation deck of the Dominion mothership, his 4 eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the small blue planet. Behind him, the Strategy Council waited in respectful silence. 6 of the Dominion's most decorated military commanders, the finest tactical minds of the hegemony of 7 stars, gathered to discuss what should have been a routine matter. "And this," Vorax said, flicking one elongated digit through the projection, "is what has caused so much consternation among our advanced scouts." The planet rotated slowly, its blue surface marbled with green and white, the third from its unremarkable yellow star, a cosmic afterthought in an unimportant spiral arm. "Indeed, High Administrator," said Commander Thex, stepping forward. His exoskeleton clicked against the polished obsidian floor. Scout Division reports that it houses a sentient species showing rudimentary signs of technological advancement. Vorax's secondary breathing slits fluttered in what the Council recognized as amusement. "Define rudimentary." "They've barely left their atmosphere," Thex replied, manipulating the controls on his wrist device. The hologram zoomed in to show primitive satellites and space stations orbiting the planet. Their furthest exploration has been to their own moon, and even that was decades ago by their time measurement. "Yet Scout Captain Zine filed a formal recommendation for bypass protocol," said Vorax, his voice hardening. "That would delay our resource extraction by at least 40 cycles. Most irregular." Science Officer Mira, the only non-military member of the Council, cleared her throat. "With respect, High Administrator, Captain Zine had reasons for his caution." All eyes turned to Mira. Unlike the others with their armored exoskeletons, her translucent skin revealed the complex network of neural pathways that marked her as a member of the Thinker caste. "Captain Zine spent 3 planetary rotations observing them," she continued, her voice soft but unwavering. "His reports indicate unusual adaptability and a concerning propensity for violence, even among their own kind." "Violence?" Security Chief Draz laughed, the sound like stones grinding together. "That's practically a recommendation for immediate subjugation. Violent species make excellent labor assets once properly conditioned." "Not this kind of violence," Mira insisted. She accessed the central database through her neural implant, projecting new images onto the holographic display. "They've developed thousands of ways to kill each other. Their entire history is written in blood. Where other species might have 1 or 2 weapons of mass destruction in their evolution, these creatures have dozens, constantly refined and improved upon." The projection showed primitive but effective weapons, nuclear devices, chemical agents, biological warfare components. "Impressive for primitives," Commander Thex admitted, "but nowhere near our capabilities." "It's not the weapons themselves," Mira explained, frustration evident in her tone. "It's the mindset behind them. Most species develop technology for survival or comfort. These creatures seem to develop it predominantly for domination, and they're remarkably quick studies." Vorax waved a dismissive hand. "Every newly discovered sentient species has its quirks. Science Officer, that's why we have standard subjugation protocols." "Sir, with respect," Mira persisted, "Captain Zine's report specifically noted their psychological makeup. They don't surrender easily. When faced with superior force, they don't capitulate, they adapt, they improvise." "All the more reason to move quickly," Security Chief Draz interjected. "Before they advance further." Vorax studied the planet for a long moment. The Dominion had conquered 372 worlds across 12 galaxies. Their protocols were refined, tested, perfect. What threat could one primitive planet pose? "Show me these creatures," he commanded. The hologram shifted again, displaying various specimens of the dominant life form, bipedal, soft-skinned, with ridiculous tiny appendages and only 2 eyes. They looked absurdly vulnerable. "They called themselves humans," Mira said quietly. "Humans," Vorax repeated, the word awkward in his mouth. "And how many Dominion warriors would it take to subdue one human?" Science Officer Mira hesitated. "Physically? One junior warrior could handle several. They're significantly weaker than even our youngest soldiers." "Then I believe we've wasted enough time on this discussion," Vorax concluded. "Prepare the standard first contact subjugation protocol." "High Administrator," Mira tried one last time, Captain Zin's final recommendation was most emphatic. He suggested, "Captain Zine has spent too long in deep space observation," Vorax cut her off. 372 worlds, science officer. All now productive members of the hegemony. The protocol works. Mira fell silent, her neural pathways flashing in patterns that indicated severe distress. The deployment was textbook perfect. 10,000 Dominion shock troops descended on the human planet's major population centers simultaneously. Command ships positioned themselves above what the intelligence division identified as capitals of the largest nation-states. James Tucker was driving home from his night shift when the sky turned purple. At first he thought it might be an unusually early dawn or some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. Then the massive ships broke through the cloud cover. He pulled his truck over to the side of the highway, alongside dozens of other stopped vehicles. People stood on the roadside, phones raised toward the sky, documenting what would soon become the most significant event in human history. "Holy shit," James whispered, stepping out of his truck. The nearest ship hung directly over downtown Phoenix, its size defying comprehension. It blotted out the stars, a dark mass of alien angles and strange lights. His phone buzzed with emergency alerts, military channels that hadn't been activated since the Cold War, suddenly broadcast orders. James recognized what was happening before most civilians would. 10 years in the army had taught him what a mobilization looked like. This was an invasion. Back on the Dominion mothership, Vorax watched with satisfaction as the first reports came in. "The creatures are reacting as expected. High Administrator," reported Commander Thex. "Confusion, panic, some primitive military response forming, but nothing our forces can't handle." "Any casualties on our side?" Vorax inquired, almost bored. "None reported. Their projectile weapons barely scratch our standard armor. As predicted, they're completely outmatched." Science Officer Mira stood quietly at the back of the command center, her neural pathways now deliberately stilled to hide her emotions. She had uploaded Captain Zane's complete, unredacted report to her personal database. The part that the High Administrator had dismissed contained the captain's most urgent warning. "These creatures, these humans, appear to possess a quality I've never encountered in my 80 cycles of exploration. They don't know when they're beaten. Where logic would dictate surrender, they choose resistance. Where death is certain, they still fight, and most disturbing of all, they learn with remarkable speed. Any prolonged engagement will only serve to educate them about our weaknesses." On the main view screen, Mira watched the primitive human military forces gather. Their weapons were indeed laughably ineffective against Dominion armor. Their aircraft fell from the sky when caught in the disruptor fields. By any rational calculation, this would be one of the quickest subjugations in hegemony history. Yet a deep unease settled in her gut. Something in the way the humans moved, organized, communicated. There was no panic in their military response, only grim determination. The first phase of the attack went exactly as planned. The humans' most significant military installations were neutralized within hours. Their global communication networks were disrupted, but intentionally left partially functional to spread fear and demoralization. The Dominion shock troops established landing zones in strategic locations, preparing for the second phase, the capture of human leadership, and the formal announcement of their new status as subjects of the hegemony. "Begin Phase 2, Vorax commanded. Commander Thex hesitated, reviewing the incoming data. "Sir, we're seeing some irregular patterns in the human response. They're adapting their tactics more quickly than anticipated." "Insignificant," Vorax dismissed. "Proceed as planned." As the second wave of troops deployed, Mira accessed the live feeds from the ground forces. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The humans were already salvaging Dominion technology from damaged units. They were learning, adapting, organizing in ways the simulations hadn't predicted. And in their eyes, those strange, limited two eyes, there wasn't fear anymore. There was fury. James Tucker found himself at a makeshift military outpost, his old skills suddenly relevant again. Around him, soldiers and civilians worked together with a unity of purpose he'd never witnessed before. Global conflicts and political divisions had vanished overnight. "They should have wiped us out completely," said Colonel Whitmore, examining a piece of alien technology they'd recovered. "Instead, they're giving us time to learn." James nodded, field stripping what appeared to be an alien weapon. "They don't think we're a threat, Big mistake. In the distance, the alien ships continued their methodical destruction of military targets, but already humans were disappearing into subway tunnels, sewers, and wilderness areas. Already they were studying, reverse engineering, preparing. Already they were becoming something that the Dominion had never encountered before. An enemy that refused to be conquered. 72 hours after the initial Dominion attack, Dr. Eleanor Watts hadn't slept. The makeshift laboratory beneath MIT's ruins hummed with salvaged equipment, some human, some decidedly not. Her fingers traced the alien circuitry of what had once been part of a Dominion scout drone. "It's not magic," she muttered to her team of exhausted scientists and engineers. "It's technology. Technology can be understood. Technology can be replicated." Dr. Arav Singh, her colleague in quantum physics, looked up from his workstation. His normally immaculate appearance had given way to a 3-day stubble and bloodshot eyes. "I've isolated the power source," he said. "It's utilizing principles similar to our theoretical work on zero-point energy, but they've solved the containment problem." Eleanor nodded. "Good. Focus on reverse engineering that component. We don't need to understand everything at once, just enough to level the playing field." The room fell silent as General Morris entered. The career military man looked as though he'd aged a decade in 3 days. "Please tell me you have something," he said, without preamble. "We've lost the eastern seaboard. The aliens are establishing what look like processing facilities in major urban centers." Eleanor exchanged glances with her team. "We've made progress on their communication systems and power sources. Give us another 48 hours, and we might have a prototype weapon that can penetrate their armor." "We don't have 48 hours, the general replied flatly. "The president is organizing a coordinated global counterattack in 36. Dr. Singh looked up sharply. "That's suicide with conventional weapons." "Conventional is all we've got," General Morris countered. "Unless you can work faster." Eleanor stood, wiping grime from her hands. "We'll have something in 24. It won't be pretty, and it won't be perfect, but it will hurt them." As the general left, she turned to her team. "No more breaks? No more sleep? Humanity doesn't have the luxury of time." In what remained of Phoenix, James Tucker led a group of 30 survivors through the sewers. Above them, Dominion shock troops patrolled the streets, rounding up humans for processing. No one knew exactly what processing entailed, but the screams suggested it wasn't pleasant. "Stay close," James whispered as they approached a junction. "Remember, they have thermal imaging. Keep the cooling blankets wrapped tight." Beside him, Dana Wallace clutched a modified rifle. Once a high school physics teacher, she'd helped adapt the weapon using salvaged Dominion technology. The modifications were crude but effective. They'd taken down 2 scout drones already. "Movement ahead," Dana hissed, raising her hand. The group froze. James peered around the corner, expecting to see the telltale glow of Dominion exoskeletons. Instead, he found another group of humans, filthy, terrified, but alive. Their leader stepped forward, a woman in tattered military fatigues, Captain Sarah Bradley, 75th Ranger Regiment. She introduced herself. "Or what's left of it. James Tucker, former Army. We're heading for the rendezvous point at Papago Park." Captain Bradley nodded. "We intercepted the broadcast. We're on the same path. We also have intel you might find valuable." She produced a small device, clearly of Dominion origin. "We managed to capture one of their communications officers. Before he died, he activated this. It's been translating their transmission." James took the device, hope sparking for the first time in days. This could change everything. "They're not as unified as they appear," Bradley explained as their groups merged and continued through the tunnels. "There's dissent in their ranks. Some of their scientists believe they've underestimated us. They're pushing for a different approach, but their leadership is doubling down." "Pride," James said. "The oldest weakness in the book." Dana adjusted her makeshift weapon. "If they're arguing among themselves, that gives us time. And time is the one thing we need most." As they continued their journey beneath the occupied city, James thought about the Dominion troops above. So confident in their technology, their protocols, their superiority. They'd never faced a species that had spent its entire existence fighting, mostly against itself, yes, but fighting nonetheless. Humans didn't need to invent warfare to combat the aliens. They just needed to redirect it. High Administrator Vorax paced the command deck, his exoskeleton clicking against the floor in an irregular rhythm that betrayed his agitation. "Explain again," he demanded, "how primitives managed to disable 3 of our capital ships." Commander Thex's posture was rigid with tension. "They've adapted their nuclear weapons, sir. Crude modifications, but effective when delivered by suicide pilots." "Suicide pilots?" Vorax repeated incredulously. "They're sacrificing themselves deliberately." "Yes, sir, and with concerning frequency." Science Officer Mira stepped forward, her neural pathways pulsing with urgent patterns. "This is precisely what Captain Zan warned about. High Administrator. They value victory over survival." "Nonsense," Vorax snapped. "No rational species values victory over survival. It defies evolutionary logic." "With respect," Mira persisted, "we must consider that our understanding of their psychology is flawed. They're not responding according to any of our models." On the main view screen, footage played from ground forces. Humans using Dominion technology against its creators. Crude but effective adaptations appearing with alarming speed. Most disturbing were the reports of Dominion equipment disappearing from destroyed units. Humans were scavenging, learning, evolving their tactics hourly. They're communicating globally despite our disruption of their networks. Thex added. They've created some kind of alternative system. Vorax's secondary breathing slits flared. Increase the intensity of the subjugation protocol. Deploy the neurological disruptors. If they won't submit willingly, we'll modify their capacity for resistance. Mira's translucent skin flushed with alarm patterns. "Sir, the neurological disruptors haven't been fully tested on their physiology. The results could be unpredictable." "I'm not interested in predictability. Science Officer, I'm interested in results." Vorax turned to Commander Thex. "Deploy them immediately. Let's end this fast." As the command was relayed, Mira discreetly accessed her personal database. Captain Zun's full report contained one more warning, a warning she hadn't shared because it seemed too fantastical. Most concerning of all is their response to existential threat. Where most species become more conservative when faced with extinction, humans become more innovative, more willing to take risks. It is as though the threat of annihilation removes their normal constraints rather than reinforcing them. As the neurological disruptors were deployed across Earth's atmosphere, Mira wondered if they had just removed humanity's final constraint. The wave hit without warning. Across the globe, humans collapsed in agony as the neurological disruptors activated. In underground bunkers, in resistance hideouts, in the ruins of cities, people clutched their heads and screamed. In the MIT laboratory, Eleanor Watts fell to her knees, blood trickling from her nose. Around her, her team suffered similarly. Only Dr. Singh remained standing, though clearly in pain. "Arav," she gasped. "How?" "Cochlear implant," he managed, pointing to his ear. "It's creating some kind of interference." Through the haze of pain, Eleanor's mind raced. If a simple cochlear implant provided partial protection, then the disruptor worked on specific neural frequencies that could be blocked. "The MRI?" she choked out. "Get me to the MRI." Dr. Singh half carried her to the repurposed magnetic resonance imaging machine. As he activated it, the powerful magnetic field created a bubble of relief. Electromagnetic shielding, Eleanor realized. That's our answer. Across the country, in the Phoenix sewers, James Tucker and his group were incapacitated by the same attack. Only Dana Wallace remained partially functional, crawling toward her backpack. "The Faraday cage," she gasped to Captain Bradley, who lay twitching nearby. "For the salvaged tech. Get inside it." The physics teacher had constructed a simple Faraday cage to prevent the Dominion from tracking their salvaged equipment. Now, as she pulled it over herself and Bradley, the pain diminished. "It's electromagnetic," Dana realized. "They're attacking our nervous systems directly." Bradley's military mind immediately grasped the implications. "If we can block it, we can fight back," Dana finished. The neural attack lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Dominion expected to find a broken, submissive species ready for processing. Instead, they found something else entirely. The humans had adapted. Again. Across the globe, survivors fashioned crude electromagnetic shields. Helmets lined with salvaged metal, rooms encased in copper wire, repurposed medical equipment generating counter-frequencies. The attack that should have ended the resistance instead galvanized it, providing crucial information about Dominion technology. Most importantly, it united humanity as nothing else could. Former enemies became allies, nations shared resources and information without hesitation. The common threat had transformed Earth's fractured civilization into a single organism with one purpose: survival. In Washington, D.C., in the reinforced bunker beneath the ruined Pentagon, what remained of the world's military leadership gathered. On makeshift screens, they watched as Eleanor Watts explained her discovery. "Their neural disruptors gave us the key," she said, her image flickering. "We've reverse-engineered the frequency modulators from their communication systems. Combined with the power source Dr. Singh decoded, we've created this." She held up what looked like a modified satellite dish connected to a jumble of human and alien technology. "It generates a directed electromagnetic pulse that specifically targets their technology. It won't work on their larger ships, but it will disable their ground troops' exoskeletons and weapons." General Morris leaned forward. "How many can you make?" "With the schematics we're distributing. Thousands. Every university, every electronics factory, every garage workshop can build these." For the first time since the invasion began, hope spread through the bunker. "We launched the counteroffensive in 12 hours, the president announced. "Distribute Dr. Watts's schematics worldwide. It's time to show these visitors what happens when you corner humans." On the Dominion mothership, chaos erupted as the first reports came in. Ground forces were failing catastrophically, their exoskeletons suddenly inert, their weapons powerless. "Impossible," Vurax raged. "They couldn't have developed countermeasures this quickly." Science Officer Mira watched the data streams with a mixture of horror and fascination. "They didn't develop them, sir. They adapted our own technology against us." "Launch orbital strikes," Vurax commanded. "Obliterate their resistance centers." Commander Thex hesitated. "Sir, we're detecting energy signatures across the planet. They've established some kind of defensive grid using our own frequency modulators." "This is unprecedented," Mira breathed. "They're not just using our technology, they're improving it." On the screens they watched as human forces emerged from hiding, wielding weapons that no longer resembled their primitive originals. The tide was turning, not gradually, but in a sudden, catastrophic shift. "Recall all ground forces," Vurax ordered, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Prepare for orbital bombardment." But even as he gave the command, alarms blared throughout the mothership. Somehow, the humans had penetrated their defenses. Somehow, impossible as it seemed, they had brought the fight to the Dominion itself. In the launch bay of the mothership, the first of the human strike teams emerged from captured Dominion shuttles. Leading them was James Tucker, his face grim behind an electromagnetic shield helmet. "Remember," he told his team, "we only get one shot at their command center. Make it count." Behind him, Dana Wallace checked the makeshift EMP cannon they'd built using Eleanor Watts' schematics. Captain Bradley confirmed their route through the ship's ventilation system, mapped from data they'd extracted from captured Dominion soldiers. James looked at the determined faces around him. Teachers, soldiers, ordinary people, transformed by extraordinary circumstances into humanity's last, best hope. "They should have heeded the warning," he said quietly. "Now they pay the price." The humans moved forward into the heart of the alien vessel, carrying with them the most dangerous weapon in the universe, the absolute refusal to surrender. The Dominion mothership was a labyrinth of crystalline corridors and pulsing biotech, designed to confuse and disorient any unauthorized visitors. It had never needed internal defenses. No species had ever dared to board a Dominion command vessel in the 3,000 cycles of the hegemony's expansion. Until now. James Tucker and his strike team moved with practiced precision through the alien vessel, guided by Captain Bradley's stolen schematics. Behind them, similar teams infiltrated critical systems throughout the ship. The humans had one chance, one desperate gambit born of necessity and ingenuity. "Approaching the central processor core," Bradley whispered, checking the holographic map projected from her salvaged Dominion device. 2 minutes to synchronization. James nodded, his focus absolute. Every human team across the mothership was operating on the same countdown. Synchronization was everything. "Something's wrong," Dana Wallace said suddenly, examining her scanner. "These energy readings don't match our intelligence. The core configuration is different." James felt a chill. "They anticipated us." "No," Dana replied, her eyes widening as she processed the data. "They're not defending against us. They're preparing a final attack. These readings suggest they're charging their primary weapon system, the same one they used to destroy our military bases, but magnified tenfold. Target? Bradley asked grimly. Based on the trajectory, the entire planet. The three humans exchanged looks of cold determination. The plan had just changed from sabotage to something far more desperate. We go directly for their central AI, James decided. Override the safety protocols on our EMP devices. Maximum yield. That'll fry everything, Dana warned, including our own neural shields. We won't survive the feedback. Neither will they, James replied, and that's all that matters now. On the command deck, High Administrator Vorax watched with mounting horror as alerts flashed across every console. Human strike teams had penetrated multiple systems simultaneously. Security countermeasures were failing faster than they could be implemented. How? He demanded of no one in particular. How are they adapting so quickly? Science Officer Mira stepped forward, her neural pathways pulsing with urgent patterns. It's not just technology they're adapting, sir. It's their very consciousness. She projected data onto the main view screen, neural scans of human brains before and after the neurological attack. The change was subtle but unmistakable. The disruptors didn't subdue them, she explained, her voice tight with scientific fascination and dread. They accelerated neural development. In attempting to attack their nervous systems, we triggered an evolutionary response. Impossible, Commander Thex objected. Evolution doesn't work that way. It requires generations. For other species, yes, Mira agreed. But these humans, their neural plasticity is unlike anything we've encountered. Their brains are literally rewiring themselves in response to our technology. They're not just using our weapons. They're beginning to understand the fundamental principles behind them. Principles that took our civilization millennia to develop. Vorax stared at the data, his rigid worldview crumbling. Activate the final protocol. Sterilize the planet. We cannot allow this species to survive. As the command was given, the mothership's massive power core began to charge. Around Earth, the remaining Dominion fleet moved into position for a synchronized planet-killing strike. In the heart of the mothership, James and his team reached the central AI chamber, a cathedral-like space dominated by a pulsating crystalline structure that housed the vessel's governing intelligence. Dominion guards lay disabled around them, their exoskeletons rendered useless by the humans' EMP weapons. Dana rushed to a control interface, her fingers flying over the alien symbols she'd learned to interpret in mere days. They're initiating a planetary sterilization sequence. 3 minutes to discharge. James positioned their remaining EMP devices around the chamber, focusing on the critical junctions Dana identified. Captain Bradley coordinated with the other strike teams via their makeshift communication system. We can't stop the sequence from here, Dana reported, frustration evident in her voice. The command's been locked in. James looked at the central AI structure, its crystalline facets reflecting their desperate faces. We don't need to stop it. We need to redirect it. Bradley understood immediately. A feedback loop. Exactly, James confirmed. Dana, can you alter the targeting parameters without cancelling the sequence? Dana's eyes widened with realization. You want to turn their weapon against them. Not just against them, James clarified. Against all of them. The entire fleet. Dana turned back to the interface, her mind racing ahead of her fingers. The targeting system is quantum entangled with the fleet. If I can access the coordination protocols. As she worked, Bradley received reports from the other teams. Some had succeeded in their objectives, others had fallen, but enough critical systems had been compromised to give them a fighting chance. 1 minute to discharge, Dana announced. I've almost got it, but there's a final authorization needed. It requires Dominion neural patterns. The three humans exchanged bleak looks. They had come so far, only to be stopped by biology. Wait, Bradley said suddenly. The neural disruptor attack, Mira said it changed us. What if our brains have adapted enough to fool their systems? It was a desperate theory, but they had nothing else. James stepped forward to the neural interface, a crystalline crown designed for Dominion physiology. If this doesn't work, he said quietly, trigger the EMPs manually. Take out as much of this ship as you can. Before they could respond, he placed the alien device on his head. Pain beyond imagining exploded through James's consciousness. His vision fractured into 1,000 perspectives. He could see every corner of the mothership, feel the energy building in its core, sense the fleet positioned around Earth. The Dominion's collective knowledge flooded his mind, threatening to drown his humanity. But within that torrent of alien consciousness, he found what he needed. With a thought, partly his own, partly something new and hybrid, he redirected the discharge sequence. "Target acquired," he gasped, blood streaming from his nose and ears. "New parameters accepted." Dana checked her scanner, her face transforming with astonished hope. He did it. The weapon is now targeting the Dominion fleet itself. Bradley pulled James away from the neural interface as he collapsed. 30 seconds to discharge. "We need to find shelter." But James knew there was no shelter from what was coming. "Go," he whispered. "Get to the escape pods. I'll trigger the EMPs to make sure they can't override the sequence." "We're not leaving you," Dana insisted. James looked at her with eyes that no longer seemed entirely human. "I'm not entirely here anyway," he said enigmatically. "Now go. That's an order." As Bradley dragged a protesting Dana toward the exit, James turned back to the pulsating heart of the Dominion intelligence. The knowledge he had absorbed was already fading, but enough remained for him to understand what was happening to him, to all humans exposed to Dominion technology. They weren't just adapting, they were transforming. With his remaining strength, he activated the EMPs and surrendered to the light. High Administrator Vorax realized the truth too late. As the mothership's weapon reached full charge, the targeting coordinates suddenly shifted. Instead of Earth, the devastating energy pulse was directed at the Dominion fleet itself, and through the quantum entanglement of their systems, at the hegemony's homeworlds across 12 galaxies. "Override," he screamed. "Emergency override." "Systems non-responsive," Commander Thex reported, panic evident, despite his military discipline. "We've been locked out." Science Officer Mira watched with a strange calm as the countdown reached 0. In her final moments, she accessed Captain Zine's complete report one last time, focusing on his concluding observation. "These humans are not merely another species to be catalogued and conquered. They represent something I have never encountered before, a cosmic wildcard. They are dangerous, not because of what they are, but because of what they might become. If the Dominion engages them, only one civilization will survive the encounter, and I am no longer certain it would be ours." As the weapon discharged, sending its deadly pulse through the entangled Dominion fleet, Mira closed her eyes and wondered about the universe that would exist after today, a universe forever changed by the species they had so fatally underestimated. The discharge manifested not as destruction, but as transformation. Across Earth, humans watched in awe as the Dominion ships pulsed with blinding energy. Rather than exploding, they seemed to fold in upon themselves, disappearing into rifts in space-time that closed as quickly as they formed. In underground bunkers and makeshift command centers, survivors attempted to understand what had happened. The Dominion presence had vanished from Earth orbit. Communications from resistance teams aboard the mothership had gone silent. Salvaged Dominion technology was inert, as though the underlying principles that powered it had changed. At MIT, Dr. Eleanor Watts and Dr. Singh monitored the phenomenon through hastily recalibrated instruments. "It's not destruction," Eleanor concluded, studying the readings with growing wonder. "It's dimensional displacement. The pulse didn't destroy the fleet, it shifted it into another state of reality." "How is that possible?" asked the President via the emergency broadcast system. Eleanor shook her head. "It's not possible, not with any physics we understand. But they weren't operating on our understanding of physics." "And our people on the mothership?" General Morris asked gruffly. Eleanor and Singh exchanged pained looks. "If they were aboard when the pulse hit, they've gone with it." Silence fell across the command center as the implications sank in. Humanity had survived, but at a terrible cost. Their saviors had vanished into a realm beyond understanding. Unknown to those on Earth, James Tucker experienced the dimensional shift from within the heart of the Dominion mothership. The pulse did not kill him as expected. Instead, his consciousness, already altered by the neural interface, expanded beyond the limitations of his physical form. He perceived dimensions beyond the conventional three, saw the underlying quantum fabric of reality, understood the Dominion's technology for what it truly was, not advanced science, but a rudimentary manipulation of consciousness itself. As the mothership shifted between realities, James felt himself changing too. The boundary between his human identity and something greater blurred. He was still James Tucker, but he was also something more, something that could perceive the Dominion's true nature and potential. And in that moment of transformation, he understood the real reason Captain Zine had warned against engaging with humans. Not because humans were dangerous in their current form, but because of what contact with advanced consciousness technology might trigger within them. The Dominion hadn't just made a tactical error. They had catalyzed the next step in human evolution. Dr. Eleanor Watts stood on the observation platform of the newly constructed Quantum Research Center, watching as technicians calibrated the interretinal scanner. The massive device, a hybrid of human innovation and reverse-engineered Dominion technology, represented humanity's greatest achievement since the invasion. Behind her, Dr. Singh supervised the final preparations. "Power systems nominal," he reported. "Quantum entanglement stable. We're ready for the first official attempt." Eleanor nodded, trying to maintain scientific detachment despite the emotions swirling within her. For 5 years, they had worked toward this moment. The possibility of establishing contact with whatever dimension the Dominion fleet had been displaced to. The possibility of learning what had happened to James Tucker and the others who had saved humanity. "Commence scanning sequence," she ordered. The device hummed to life, its components shifting and realigning as it searched across dimensional boundaries. On the main monitor, data streamed in complex patterns that would have been incomprehensible before the invasion. Now they were the new language of theoretical physics. "We're receiving something," Singh announced, his voice tense with excitement. "A coherent signal, definitely artificial." Eleanor leaned forward. "Origin?" "Not from the target dimension," Singh replied, confusion evident in his tone. I don't understand. It's coming from somewhere else entirely. A third reality, neither ours nor where the Dominion went." The signal resolved itself into a recognizable pattern on the monitor. Not quite language, not quite mathematics, but something that conveyed meaning nonetheless. As Eleanor studied it, understanding dawned slowly. "It's a warning," she whispered. Singh looked up sharply. "From whom?" Before Eleanor could answer, a new pattern appeared on the screen, one that sent chills down her spine despite its simplicity. It was a DNA helix, but structured unlike any terrestrial genetic code. Alongside it appeared a star map highlighting a distant galaxy. Something's coming, Eleanor realized. Something that made both us and the Dominion seem like children playing with toys. The final part of the transmission appeared, a simplified representation of the dimensional scanner they had just activated, followed by what could only be interpreted as a shutdown command. "They detected our scanner," Singh said. "Whoever they are, they know we're looking." Eleanor made an immediate decision. "Shut it down. Shut everything down." As technicians rushed to comply, she gazed out at the night sky visible through the center's massive windows. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, beyond reality itself, something ancient had taken notice of humanity. And in the depths of her scientific mind, Eleanor understood the cosmic irony. Just as the Dominion had ignored warnings about humans, humanity now faced a choice about whether to heed a warning from beyond. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor, after all. But even as she ordered the scanner dismantled, Eleanor knew humanity would rebuild it, better, stronger, more capable. Not out of arrogance, but out of the same insatiable curiosity and determination that had allowed them to defeat the Dominion. Because if the invasion had taught humanity anything, it was this. Underestimation was the greatest mistake any species could make. And somewhere, in a realm beyond conventional understanding, James Tucker smiled with more than human awareness, watching as both his original species and his transformed Dominion kin unknowingly prepared for a challenge that would require them to move beyond their ancient enmity and evolve once more. The cycle of adaptation continued. The warning had been given. The price would be paid.